Novel in the LLM space is you've got a large number of models, all serving a similar purpose, which is to bring a lot of context and knowledge around all of the information we have into a way that can be easily summarized and presented to humans. So I think for the first time, is this real reliance on benchmarking to understand which models performing better than others. But I think as we've seen through some of the benchmarking, even though there is a particular high score on a benchmark, that doesn't always translate into a good user experience. For most of our customers who are operating at a global scale, the evaluation plays a really important part into bringing that cultural nuance and context of how the world operates.
Build the future of multi-agent software with Agency. That's AGNTCY. Now an open source Linux Foundation project, Agency is building the Internet of Agents, a collaborative layer where AI agents can discover, connect, and work across any framework. All the pieces engineers need to deploy multi-agent systems now belong to everyone who builds on Agency, including robust identity and access management that ensures every agent is authenticated and trusted before interacting. Agency also provides open, standardized tools for agent discovery, seamless protocols for agent-to-agent communication, and modular components for scalable workflows. Collaborate with developers from Cisco, Dell Technologies, Google Cloud, Oracle, Red Hat, and more than 75 other supporting companies to build next-generation AI infrastructure together. Agency is dropping code, specs, and services, no strings attached. Visit agency.org to contribute. That's AGNTCY.org.
Hello, my name's Ryan Kolln. I'm the CEO at Appen. I've been at Appen for over 7 years now, focusing on growing the business in the exciting world of AI data annotation. Prior to Appen, I have a background in engineering, specifically in data requirements for telco networks. I've done very large-scale data annotation and modeling around network optimization for telco networks. But very excited to be here today and talking about how Appen's supporting the development and evaluation of LLM networks.
Can you start for listeners that aren't that familiar with the space? I mean, for a long time, LLMs, well, I don't know this to be true, but it seemed like everyone was relying on performing to certain benchmarks, but quickly people realized that that's a very narrow way to evaluate LLMs, and it can certainly be gamed. You can train to meet those benchmarks or exceed those benchmarks. Can you talk about kind of the evolution of evaluation? And as I said, I'm particularly interested in the role of human evaluators.
Yeah, it's a very interesting market, and I think what's become novel in the LLM space is you've got a large number of models, all serving a similar purpose, which is to bring a lot of context and knowledge around all of the information we have into a way that can be easily summarized and presented to humans. So I think for the first time, is this real reliance on benchmarking to understand which models performing better than others. But I think as we've seen through some of the benchmarking, even though there is a particular high score on a benchmark, that doesn't always translate into a good user experience. And I think the reality is the benchmarks, um, they're static and typically quite narrow. Therefore, it's really difficult to get one benchmark that, even within a narrow domain, that covers all of the edge cases. I think the other issue is that the ways that humans use these models evolve very rapidly, the model itself evolving rapidly. So while the benchmarks play a really interesting snapshot into model performance, I don't always think that it's the best way to really get a measure of how good the user experience is for the models.
That leads us into both LLM evaluation of other LLMs and human evaluation. Can you start with human? I mean, that was part of the original development of these LLMs with reinforcement learning with human feedback. But it's gone beyond that, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And even before the LLM model developments over the last kind of 5 to 8 years or so, evals for large, human-based evals for large models has been going on for a very long time. And Appen has played a big role in this. So there was a type of human annotation called relevance. And really what it was is providing feedback, subjective feedback into how the large models run by the very big search and social media companies were performing. And these are the core models that are related to, for a given search term, what are the right search results that are being shown, or for a given user experience, what is the right ad that is to be shown, and human feedback into the model development lifecycle um, has been operating at really large scale for a long time, but it's a small niche within a few very large technology companies that's been riding on that. And it's probably helpful for me to explain what an evaluation looks like, or what search relevance looks like. And it's a fairly simple but subjective task, which makes it complex. So at a really high level, for a given prompt, here are two responses. Which one do you prefer and why? Right? And the type of questions that we ask our annotators and our workforce really are dependent on what the customer is trying to do. Sometimes they'll be looking for how accurate was the response. Was it formatted in the right way that is, can be easily digested? Is it grammatically correct? And then you get into, was it harmful? Was there any biases contained? So you can think about all of the different subjective elements that a model builder would want to know how well their model's performing is up for grabs in these evaluation tasks. And then what can be really important also is typically there's a follow-on question: why did you think that way? Or what would have been a better way to answer that question? And it serves two purposes. One is that it's used to measure the performance of how the models are performing, but also it's used in oftentimes in the retraining process to improve the model performance going forward. Now, what is the unique part here is for most of our customers who are operating at a global scale, the evaluation plays a really important part into bringing that cultural nuance and context of how the world operates. Um, so I'll give an example which helps highlight this. Recently, we were asked to find people in our network who were experts in parenting advice. Right? And if you find someone who's an excellent, parent in the US, they may give very different parenting advice to what is done in the Middle East or in India or in Africa. So there is this cultural context into the evals that is incredibly important. So the models work and are accurate and are giving great advice, not just based on a Western point of view, but on a real global point of view, and it brings in that cultural nuance.
That's interesting. And does that then train the model to recognize what culture the customer, the person interacting with the model, is coming from, so that it answers in a culturally relevant way, or is it averaged out, which seems to me may be problematic as well, because you end up with just extremely general, not very useful responses.
Yeah, the cultural context is really important, and the idea is that it is addressing, the requirements within a culture. But then there is also a base overlay around, what is the right thing to be doing at a humanity level. So it is trying to get the balance right between how do we want the models to be behaving at a generic view across all cultures, but then capturing that nuance within a specific uh, geographic or demographic setting.
Yeah, are you working with sovereign models in countries outside the West so that they're trained to their cultural viewpoint? I mean, that's of course one of the big complaints among smaller countries that they're getting models that are trained to a U.S. viewpoint.
Yeah, it's a really good example, and the rise of the sovereign models are really addressing this issue that I've spoken about, where it's like the cultural context isn't there. Um, the There's an interesting set of developments, and we work with some of the specific model developers in different regions. I think for our side, though, where the bulk of our customers are the large technology companies. But we do have Appen is unique in the industry where we work with both the very large US LLM model builders and the Chinese model builders, which represent kind of the most innovative model builders on the planet. And we do see some differences in there, and it's not always cultural. I mean, that's a big part, but we also see it's derived by the distribution models. So in China, we see more work related to medical and financial um, advice, and that's driven by the super apps, where you go in and it will give you medical advice to a consumer, and that's a really big part of the ecosystem there. Where in the West, you don't typically go to your smartphone for medical advice. At this stage, you go to your GP. So there is a different also set of data requirements and set of evals based off how consumers use technology in different environments also.
So does that mean that with the human evaluators that you have teams from each culture that you're working in? You're not using a global team or a US based team to evaluate or tune Chinese models, or are you? I don't know.
Yeah, so there are two parts to what our customers in China want. So there is support for the domestic applications. And then a lot of our customers in China, technology companies, have global customers, right? And you know, there's some really good examples on social media, also on e-commerce, that there's a very big global footprint. So we're helping both with the domestic and the international data requirements for the China customers.
OpenAI and it's the one that comes to mind, but certainly in some of the other models, consumer facing models, periodically you'll get two answers and be asked to choose one or the other. To me, that's a pretty flawed way of because a lot of times I'm busy and I just pick one just randomly because I don't want to have to read both. Yeah, is that useful? That consumer facing uh, effort to have them show a preference?
Look, I think it's when looking at the evaluation of the models and how they're working and the data that's used to retrain, there are many different sources that are used. Right. The benefit of going with an approach like what Appen provides, we are you know qualifying people. We know their exact demographic backgrounds, their exact interests. We know that they're going to sit down and pay attention to that task and not just click option A every time. So there's a lot of precision in the data that we're providing, albeit with very subjective feedback. Um, and I think that, looking at, the model builders look at things like the example that you gave about OpenAI, but also engagement rates, click rates, the way that they respond to the question. So there's an ensemble of data inputs that are provided to improve the performance. And what companies like Appen provide is a really important part of that.
And what you're providing is a very focused initially. I mean, we'll talk about evaluation of other LLMs, but on the human side, you're providing, as you said, a focused and trained workforce uh, with instructions of what they need to be evaluating. How many people do you have in your database of potential evaluators? It must be massive, or maybe not. I mean, maybe that's my other question. How many people do you put on a model?
Yeah. So we have millions of people in our database, and getting access to people isn't typically our challenge. Um, the it comes through finding the right people who are going to deliver um, the demographic requirements for what is required by the customer, and then the ability to ensure that they are creating data that meets the requirements of the customer. And I'll give an example. Like if we had millions of people and they were only based in the US, we would have a very US centric based workforce. The benefit that Appens brings is we've got people in. I was just looking the other day. I think it was one country where we didn't have someone in our database on the planet, and we've been doing this for a very long time. And the art of what we do is running a project where the customer's asking us to connect with people in 100 countries in parallel that speak 100 different languages and have 100 different ways of interacting with us and payments and support, etc. But it's but the customer wants a common framework around how they're going to um, the type of questions they want the contributor to be asking, how they're going to understand whether their output is high quality or not. So the ability to translate this single task into 100 different cultures and 100 different languages, and then ensure that the workers are really attuned to the nuance of the task that's being asked of them. It's a non-trivial task, and something that we do, and we productize, and we have a great set of infrastructure to be able to do that.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So you have human evaluators evaluating the evaluators.
That's right. So, yeah, and quality is a really interesting topic for human data. All right. So when we have someone evaluating the model performance, we need to check that they're not just choosing option A every time. All right. And there are many different techniques that we've got to ensure that they're providing the right kind of effort and the right quality into that data. The other issue we face a lot, Craig, is that there are people who um, try to be in a different country to what they are, or try and say that I've got these skills when they don't. So we have a pretty robust process, highly automated, to verify if people are in the location where they are. Are they humans? Um, do they have the expertise that they want? And that's again some of the things that we've built up over doing this since over 20 plus years. We've got a lot of expertise that we built into our products to make sure that we're getting high quality data.
And typically, to evaluate a customer's model, well, how large of an evaluation team are you fielding?
Yeah, it's a good question. It does vary, and it varies about the task type, and it varies about the global reach. Um, but it's not uncommon for us to have thousands of people on a specific model eval working on an ongoing basis at any given time. So the numbers can get very large very quickly. We also see there can be bursts of data. A customer recently asked us to find 20,000 people to evaluate the performance of their model. and that's a lot of humans.
Yeah, and, is so, Appen has this database of people that you've recruited and put through some evaluation, both automated and human, and then when you, wanna pull together 20,000, uh, imagine a lot of that's automated. But how then do the people interact with the model? Do you just point them at the model, or do they interact with the model through an app and uh, website or app?
Yeah, a great question. So there's two parts to our technology stack. One is the you can think about it as workforce management, and that's where we have the database of our crowd workers, the ability to go and verify and and put them through different qualification steps to understand what they're going to be good at, and also to advertise the tasks to them. So we have a CrowdGen is our brand from our crowd, and people go in there and they see what tasks are available to them. And if we find someone, if we find a project that matches someone, we will notify them. There's some great earning opportunities for you. So that's one side of it. Um, the other side is the data annotation platform, and this is exactly what you're talking about, Craig, where they come in and complete the tasks. And Appen has an exceptionally flexible and powerful data annotation platform. And the reason why it needs to be flexible is because every task that we get from our customers is a little bit different. The question might be different, the scoring, etc. So we need to create very modularized components for the our crowd workers to come in and complete the task. The other thing, what's really powerful about the annotation platform is the ability to check for quality in real time. So I'll give an example. If the task is evaluate the performance of this model and rewrite the response in a numbered bullets, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have a lot of AI checks that run in parallel to what the contributors are doing. And it could be as simple as, was the formatting correct? Was it on topic? Yeah. We get into specific things like spacing and grammatical checks. So there's a lot of AI that we're running in parallel to the task to make sure that the quality is where we need it to be.
And Appen is publicly listed in Australia. Uh, when was it founded?
Yeah, so founded in 1996, and the founding story is an interesting one, and we've been doing AI data work since the start. Um, so there was a company in '96 called Nuance. I think they got acquired by Microsoft at some point. They were building a speech recognition model where you could call up and place bet on horse races. Um, right? And they built that in the US, and this was in '96, so it wasn't called AI back then. And they thought that Australia would be a next great market to roll this out to. And they rolled it out in Australia, and it didn't work because it couldn't understand our accents. So they called up our founder, who was a professor of linguistics at the time at a university in Australia, and said, "Can you go and help us collect Australian accented English?" That was used then to train this speech recognition model so people could place bets on horse races.
No, that's fascinating. Did she? It's a woman, right?
Yeah, that's right, Julie von Willer.
Did she use Mechanical Turk, or what? Did she use an existing crowd working platform?
No, I don't think Mechanical Turk existed at this point in time. So this was pre the data annotation industry and really, at the tip of the spear of the foundation. So Julie went out and found people and brought them into a recording booth and recorded them speaking Australian accented English for the specific requirements of Nuance at the time. Um, and, you know, we did some really great work early on, and that snowballed into, really supporting uh, the development of speech recognition models. We did a lot of work with IARPA and DARPA following September 11. around building out models that had a specific focus on Arabic languages and all of the different dialects. It's interesting about Arabic is that depending on the location, it can be spoken very differently, but it's all written the same. So Appen developed a way, and it was very innovative, to phonetically transcribe colloquial Arabic that was then used to build into the speech recognition models. Yeah. So following that, we did a lot of work with Amazon Alexa early on to support the development there, and really the focus of Appen, it was fairly focused on speech models at the time, and we built out this global network of people around the world to get language and dialect accuracy. Um, and then because we had this big network all around the world, some very large technology companies came to us and said, hey, that would be great if we could leverage that to evaluate the performance of our global models. So that was the evolution of Appen from speech into relevance. And then from then, we've done a lot of work in image annotation, continue to do a lot of work in speech, and then more recently, clearly for generative AI.
Build the future of multi-agent software with Agency. That's AGNTCY. Now an open source Linux Foundation project, Agency is building the Internet of Agents, a collaborative layer where AI agents can discover, connect, and work across any framework. All the pieces engineers need to deploy multi-agent systems now belong to everyone who builds on Agency, including robust identity and access management that ensures every agent is authenticated and trusted before interacting. Agency also provides open, standardized tools for agent discovery, seamless protocols for agent-to-agent communication, and modular components for scalable workflows. Collaborate with developers from Cisco, Dell Technologies, Google Cloud, Oracle, Red Hat, and more than 75 other supporting companies to build next-generation AI infrastructure together. Agency is dropping code, specs, and services, no strings attached. Visit agency.org to contribute. That's AGNTCY.org. I was going to say that on the Mechanical Turk thing, that Fei Liu built the ImageNet data set that then was used to validate convolutional neural nets and set off the AI, supervised learning AI craze. That spawned a whole industry of data annotators. I was close for a few years with a company called Labelbox. Very bright guys who have a platform. And I think I had Appen on the podcast at some point talking about your data labeling system. But did during that supervised learning phase, not that it's over, but before transformers and generative AI took over, was that a big part of Appen's business?
Yeah, it certainly grew to be an important part of the business. We did, work in computer vision annotation and still do. So certainly that, um, the ImageNet and the Fei and the deep learning kind of evolution was really great for image recognition models. There was also neural nets used in the speech model development, which really spurned a next wave of the data collection and annotation for the speech models also.
Let's talk about you built this network of evaluators, human evaluators. You have a system that they work through to evaluate responses from AI models. This is for fine tuning. Is that right? Or is it for the foundational training?
It's mostly for in an LLM context for post training. So there are post training and eval. So in the LLM model development, there is pre-training, post-training. Pre-training is hoovering up, all of the available copy on the internet and books, etc. Highly curated, but it doesn't bring in the human context. Post-training is making sure it's bringing in how the models that have this great knowledge want to be able to convey that to humans.
And is that part of the RLHF uh, cycle, or is it after that?
It's part of the RLHF cycle. So a lot of the evals now, there's a shift from reinforcement learning with human feedback, which was effectively providing examples around how the output should look, to reinforcement learning with verifiable rewards. So this is more evaluating at a rubric base, so with a scoring system, how well the model is performing, which is then used to create a reward model which guides the output. So there is an eval component that's used as a really critical part of post training, and then there is evals which more just like how well is it performing, which may or may not be used to train the reward models.
I see. And that the reward model is you're not talking about fine tuning. You're talking about post training, right? Before the model is released, and the this is this is a tremendous amount of labor. I remember when I first found out that there were human annotators for supervised systems. It was like, oh, this is AI, but in fact, there's this army of humans out there working on it. You've moved into LLM uh, evaluation, right? Into using AI to evaluate AI. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So there is a big part of the market that's using AI to evaluate AI, right? Which is really important. Um, there are some challenges that presents though, because you are trusting another model to uh, effectively act as a human,
Yeah.
right? And the ability that the level of confidence that you have in that the eval model really depicts what confidence you have in the outcome of those evals, right? So there is no perfect model at the moment. What we are seeing is that there's eval models being created that are very narrow domain specific, right? One, it's cheaper, it's faster, but it's fine tuned to be very specific eval. I think that as we wind the clock forward, eh, you know, AI is evaluating AI is going to be a big part of the market. Um, I think that human evaluating AI is still going to remain the gold standard, and be, a really important part of the market going forward.
Yeah. And does Appen have uh, evaluation LLMs that you've developed yourself, or
Yeah, so we have the ability to bring AI and human, and what becomes really important is um, an AI will evaluate the AI model and will come with a confidence index. And where it's low confidence, it can be verified by a human. Also, we use the human to do spot checks around making sure that the model's performing right. So the ability for us to incorporate humans with the AI evals in a single workflow, I think that's something we're betting on and investing in and making sure. I think that's where the market's going to be headed in the long run.
and when you say the market for evaluation, is it a crowded market? It's certainly a large market.
It's a large market. It is crowded, and what we typically find is that there's competitors who have their different strengths. So there will be some who are very focused on, very advanced science and the hard science of mathematics. There's some who specialize in coding. The thing that Appen brings is that broad contextual knowledge with the ability to go, domain specific deep in different areas. So, we can find people all around the globe who represent humanity, but then also translate that into people in Thailand who have a PhD in molecular biology, right? Now, that pool gets a lot smaller. We can't find tens of thousands of those folks, but it's the ability to go both broad and deep is where Appen shines.
How do you figure out what to pay people? Because if you're doing a PhD in molecular biology, certainly they're going to demand a higher a pay than somebody who's just evaluating garden variety question and answers.
Supply demand economics, which drive, but there's also when we find someone who is delivering consistently high quality data and has a real interest in the work that we do and a passion for it and wants to come and complete that work. Those folks are incredibly valued, both for us and for our customers. So we do differentiate our pricing, even at an individual level.
Yeah. Is this something that somebody can make a living on? Or is it sort of gig work that people drop in and out of?
Yeah, it's increasingly we're seeing people who this is a large part of their earning opportunity. So we have folks at Appen who 20 plus hours a week, and they're consistently doing this work, and again are really passionate about it and really enjoy doing the work and understand the value that they're providing to the AI ecosystem. So that there's I think the human data annotation industry gets a bad rep sometimes, and it's like pushed to the lowest common denominator. When you speak to our crowd workers, they really enjoy the work that they're doing, and they're rewarded appropriately, and yeah, they're super passionate about the industry.
Yeah. Do you have you? I mean, there's certainly in India and the Philippines, for example, a whole industry of annotation uh, provided by business process outsourcing companies. Do you tap those? Do you subcontract? Do you acquire those to add to uh, your roster, or how do you interact with those people?
Yeah, there's we typically have enough breadth in our database of people who are working from home to be able to deliver the needs of our customers. Um, there are times when a customer will have uh, data security requirements where it needs to be done in a facility, and we support that model. And Appen does both. Appen is predominantly a work from home crowd based model, but we also have many facilities around the world where we can support the more secure requirements of our customers.
Yeah, and what's the do you have kind of, I mean, of course, there's a bell curve distribution, but what is the top of the curve? What kind of people uh, do you have doing this kind of work? Are they, I don't know, stay-at-home moms? Are they, young people that digital nomads, or are they, yeah, professionals that just want to be involved?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really fascinating. So the mix of I'll talk about Appen previously, which is pre LLM. It would be a mix of some of the things that you spoke about. So stay at home parents, people who are in remote areas, and before work from home was such a big part of the market. Retirees and students, I would say, kind of the big categories. But as we get into the LLM space and the work that we're doing is increasingly domain specific, I mean, we have people who have multiple PhDs who work for Appen. who are just very passionate about the field that they work in and want to support the development of AI. So the market has shifted very quickly, and now it's people who may have a full-time job and then they come home and can earn a really good hourly rate providing feedback into how the models are performing in an area of domain specificity that they're really passionate about.
Can you talk about what the hourly rate is? I'm frankly thinking a few friends and relatives that might like that work.
Yeah, so it does vary, and it's a significant variation, and it can be um the industry at a whole, but Appen in particular, we pay above minimum wage every place we operate in. So there is a floor, right? And it does not go below that floor, right? So I think in the past, maybe this is more Mechanical Turk days where it might have been, you get a penny for a task, and you look back after an hour and you're like, well, that wasn't worth it. That's not the case anymore. So which is great, and Appen's never been in that part of the market. So anywhere from kind of above minimum wage to hundreds of dollars an hour for a domain specific expert.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Uh, yeah, and so this is a growing space. Do you think that the role of AI evaluation will crowd out the human evaluation? I mean, you were saying there will always be a role for humans, but how do you see that developing? I mean, also models are through various strategies are getting increasingly accurate.
I see the market in two sides at the moment. So there is a B2C market, which is focused on consumer users, and a B2B market, which is focused on, that's where you get into agentic AI and, how our enterprises will be adopting AI to improve their operations. Um, the B2C market, I think, will be dominated by a few companies that have very large distribution in digital services. So you've got Google, Meta, OpenAI in the West, handful of companies in China, and I think that's going to be the landscape there. Um, and the interesting thing is that they operate all globally. So I don't think we'll see a regional B2C uh, sovereign models that actually have impact, purely driven by the distribution. The other phenomenon that I see will play out is we've been, as consumers, as from the consumer side, trained to exchange information about ourselves for some utility in a digital service. All right. All right. And this is a very well trodden path. And that information about ourselves is used in advertising. Right. So there is a very well established ecosystem in place um, to create that transfer of wealth. And I don't think we're there at the LLM point yet, where this has been a major part of it. But you start to see what Google are doing, and I think we'll see the similar thing with Meta. And it'll be interesting, OpenAI, at what point, if they do start to bring in advertising as a way to kind of offset the cost of the development and the inference for the models, because I can't see a world where the subscription fees are going to offset the compute required to run these models. Um, and in a bit of a long arc here, but I think what's going to be really important, and again, something that we've experienced through the market, is getting the user experience, that marginal part better, and getting the ad targeting marginal part better just has huge economic ramifications. So I expect that as AI becomes more pervasive than what we've had in the past with search and other forms of consumer applications, that there's going to be an increasing need for the subjective feedback into how these models are performing, and that will rise because of the economics, the order of magnitude of the economics that support that environment.
So you have a view across many different models. Are you generally impressed with model performance, or are you kind of privately appalled and thank God we have human evaluators?
It's a little bit of both. There are areas where they work incredibly well, and there are areas where I don't think they are living up to the hype. So, you know, I'm excited about our role in helping and the way that the industry is progressing, and I think it's the pace of innovation is faster. Much if you compare it to you brought up Fei Fei Li and the ImageNet, that was incredibly fast paced. This is, I think, 10 times faster. So we're just moving at a pace that we haven't seen before. So it's it's hard to make an assessment at a point in time because I'll be wrong in 2 months from now.
And I've been asking people this, what do you think has to happen? Right now, it feels that we've hit kind of a plateau on LLM development. I mean, there's incremental improvement on this model or that, but there isn't the kind of breakthrough that came with the transformer introduction of the transformer algorithm. To me, the next step is solving catastrophic forgetting so that you can have a model learn continuously without erasing its earlier training weights. What do you think is the next horizon that the industry has got to get through?
Look, I think when we cast our eye back over time, right? There are three things that drive model performance. It's some type of shift in architecture, it's scaling compute and scaling data, right? And I draw this curve where it's like the, the architecture gives a step change, like what we saw with transformers, like what we saw with you know convolutional neural networks. You had a step change, and then this gradual improvement over time, right? And that improvement over time is driven by less about architecture breakthrough that's refining the architecture, but it's just throwing a hell of a lot of data at it and a hell of a lot of compute. So I think we're at this stage now, and you see it with the subsequent releases of OpenAI's models. The difference between you know uh, GPT-2 to ChatGPT was enormous, right? And that was driven largely by human feedback, and then 3 to 4 and 4 to 5 less so, right? Um, the breakthroughs that are needed to make this adopt at scale, it will be interesting whether there is an architecture breakthrough that creates this, or it's just going to be the long slog of data and compute. And I think when you look at the investments that are being made in the industry at the moment, compute is clearly something that people are betting on. So it's a hard one because the model architecture breakthrough is really difficult to predict, almost impossible to predict. At what point will someone come with a new architecture? It's like trying to predict uh, innovation. It's a non-linear path, um, which makes it really exciting, right? Because there will be a point in time where someone comes up with either a slightly different architecture or a radically different architecture that has a huge breakthrough. But I think we're in this period of time at the moment where it's grinding out the improvements through scaling compute and scaling data.
Is there anything I haven't asked that you'd like to talk about?
I think I spoke a bit about the B2C side of the market. I think the B2B side is a really interesting one also. So, as we think about evals and data curation and training, the B2B market is quickly evolving as a quite separate stream where, the training data for agentic systems requires, what's called reinforcement gyms, where people can go in and create a simulated environment with lots of different software, synthetic data, synthetic documents. And the example is like, if you want to build a agent that is really good at creating financial documents in the oil and gas industry, you need to create an environment that is going to be able to go and train on something that looks like that. So we're seeing increasing demand for these highly highly industry and functional specific training environments. And then I think the next phase of that is making sure that the evals of that data is really accurate. So there's a part of the annotation market, which is, can you find me a functional and domain expert, so a finance person with oil and gas industry, to go and evaluate how these molds are performing. So it's a really interesting market. I think the B2C side, there's a really clear path for massive human evals at scale to bring that global subjectivity and context. In the enterprise space and the B2B side, highly fragmented, small and narrow applications that are going to be built out. So it's going to be super interesting how both of these sides evolve, but I see them kind of quickly diverging.